Where's the second big thing?
Krishna Govinda Govinda Gopalananda Lal. Krishna Govinda Govinda Gopalananda Lal. Krishna Govinda Govinda Gopalananda Lal. Krishna Govinda Gopalananda Lal. Krishna Govinda Govinda Gopalananda Lal. Krishna Govinda Govinda Gopalananda Lal. Krishna Govinda Govinda Gopalananda Govinda Govinda Gopalananda Lal. Krishna Govinda Govinda Gopalananda Lal. Govinda Govinda Gopalananda Lal. Krishna Govinda Govinda Gopalananda Lal. Hey Gopalananda Lal, 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 Gopalananda Lal. Krishna Govinda Govinda Gopalananda Lal. Krishna Govinda Govinda Gopalananda Lal. Govinda Govinda Gopalananda Lal. Krishna Govinda Govinda Gopalananda Lal. Krishna Govinda Govinda Gopalananda Lal. Krishna Govinda Govinda Gopalananda Lal. Govinda Govinda Gopalananda Lal. Krishna Govinda Govinda Gopalananda Lal. Gopalananda Lal, 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 Gopalananda Lal. Gopalananda Lal, Gopalananda Lal, Gopalananda Lal, Gopalananda Lal. Gopalananda Lal, Gopalananda Lal, Gopalananda Lal, Gopalananda Lal. Krishna Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Hare Hare. Krishna Govinda Govinda, Gopalananda Lal. Krishna Govinda Govinda, Gopalananda Lal. Govinda Govinda, Gopala Nanda Lal, Krishna Govinda Govinda, Gopala Nanda Lal. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. 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 Om Namo Janmadyasya yathunvayachateshvabhigyasvarate brahma hridaya dikavaye muhyanti yat suraya tejo varimridam yatha vinimayo yatratrisargam risha dhamnasvina sada nirasta kuhakam satyam param dhimahi satyam param dhimahi satyam param dhimahi Yam pravrajanta manupetam apeta krityam dvaipayano virahakatara juhava putreti tanmayatayo taravo binedus tam sarva bhuta hridayam munimanatosmi Narayanam namaskritya naram chema narotamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayamudiraye nashtaprayeshvabhadrishu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavatyutamash Loke Bhaktir Bhavati Naistiki. Hare Krishna. So I'm very happy to be with all of you. I'll speak in English according to the previous agreement. And we'll have a little seminar this evening, tomorrow evening, and then I believe on Friday evening. And I will read something from the some verses from the 22nd chapter of the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, which is called Krishna Steals the Gopis' Garments. It's a very famous Lila, and oftentimes you see the pictures of Krishna sitting on the tree, and around him all the colorful saris of the gopis, and gopis are standing naked. And this Lila is greatly misunderstood and somewhat, yeah. So I'll try to speak about this controversial Lila. In fact, Nam Sankirtan Prabhu told me that once he came to an artist who was depicting this Lila, and because he's a brahmachari, he just couldn't look at this picture because it was too much for him. All these naked women standing there in the water, and Krishna smiling and looking at them with great interest. So anyway, we'll talk about this definitely very juicy subject matter and try to shed some light according to the explanations of our acharyas. And yeah, in the beginning we'll chant the first verse of this chapter now, and then I will give a little introduction to the whole thing, why it is necessary to meditate on such Leelas, and what does it mean for us neophytes in devotional service. Anyway, Sri Sukha Vacha Hemante Prathame Masi Hemante Prathame Masi Nandavraja Kumarika Nandavraja Kumarikaha Cherur Havishyam Bunjanaha Cherur Havishyam Bunjanaha Katyayanyarchana Vratam Katyayanyarchana Vratam Shri Sukha Uvacha Hemante Prathame Masi Nandavraja Kumarikaha Cherur Havishyam Bunjanaha Katyayanyarchana Vratam Shri Sukha Uvacha Shri Sukadeva Goswami said Hemante during the winter Prathame in the first Masi month Nandavraja of the cowherd village of Nanda Maharaja Kumarikaha the unmarried young girls Cheruhu performed Havishyam unseasoned khichdi Bunjanaha subsisting on Katyayani of the goddess Katyayani Archana Vratam the vow of worship. Translation. Sukadeva Goswami said, during the first months of the winter season, the young unmarried girls of Gokula observed the vow of worshipping goddess Katyayani. For the entire months, they ate only unspiced khichdi. Purport. The word Hemante refers to the months of Margashira, from approximately the middle of November to the middle of December. According to the Western calendar, in the volume 1, chapter 22 of Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Srila Prabhupada comments that the gopis first ate havishyana, a kind of food prepared by boiling together mung dal and rice without any spices or turmeric. According to Vedic injunction, this kind of food is recommended to purify the body before one enacts a ritualistic ceremony. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hemante prathame masi Shishuku vacha Hemante prathame masi Nandavraja Kumarikaha Cherur Havishyam Bunjanaha Katyayanyarchana Vratam. Sukadeva Goswami said, during the first months of the winter season, the young unmarried girls of Gokula observed the vow of worshipping goddess Katyayani. For the entire months, they ate only unspiced khichdi. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Vanchakalpatarubhyasya Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Namasristam manamapi sachiputra mutras svarupam rupam tasyagrajam rupurim madhurim goshtavatim radakunda girivaramaho radhikam adavasam prapto yasya prathita kripaya shri gurum tam natosmi yantah pravishya mama vacham mam prasuptam sanjivayata kila shakti daraksvadam nanyam shahasta charana shravanat vagadim pranannamo bhagavate purushaya tubhyam swasyastu vishwasya kalah prasidatam deyanto bhutani shivam mithodiyam manascha badram bhajatat tadhokshaje aveshyatam naumati rapyahaytuki. So we're reading the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the crown jewel of all the Vedic literature. The 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam is approximately 1/3 of whole Srimad Bhagavatam, and by far it's the most important, most poetic, and most beautiful, and most philosophically laden part of the entire Srimad Bhagavatam. So the whole Srimad Bhagavatam is created for us, according to the first verse of Srimad Bhagavatam, to facilitate our meditation on the Supreme Truth, Supreme Absolute Truth, Satyam Param Dhimahi. Srila Vyasadeva, in the first verse of Srimad Bhagavatam, he says, let us meditate on this Supreme Absolute Truth. And this meditation on the Supreme Absolute Truth is the way of salvation. We all, to a certain extent, to a different extent, to this different clarity, understand the need of salvation, the need of getting free from this endless repetition of birth and death. Of course, those people who don't believe in reincarnation, they don't want to get free from the repetition of birth and death, because according to them there is no repetition of birth and death. But even they, somehow or other, they have this notion of salvation, that something is wrong with this sort of existence which is given to us, and some other existence is actually worthy of us. Or we are worthy of this other existence. This existence which we are leading is not really a noble existence. It's something which is very denigrating and very humiliating. It is humiliating because we are so utterly dependent on this body, and we know what this body means. You know, I will not spoil your mood by describing the items of this material body, but it's quite humiliating if we honestly and dispassionately look at the material existence. It's not a very noble thing to lead material life, but still we're very attached to this material life, despite this idea that we need some other way of existence, and despite this notion or intuition that some other way of existence does exist, still we are very miserably attached to this way of living, to this environment. And there is a very important reason for this. And the reason is that here we play the main role. We are the main hero or heroine of the drama of our life. And we don't want to become somebody who is playing some secondary roles. After all, who wants to play secondary roles?
Nobody wants to play secondary roles. Everyone wants to be the main hero. So the drama of our life is very, how to say this, very absorbing. It really sucks in our consciousness. Due to this, you know, excitement of being the hero and making the great decisions and, you know, doing this and experiencing some adventures. You know, people just to experience some adventures, they do such stupid things. Like recently, these people who went to see the Titanic, who went deep down for 3,800 meters just to see some, you know, rotten, roasted iron remains of this Titanic. What's the point? The point is that, you know, I'm the hero. I'm the adventurer. I am doing this, and this is a very interesting thing which I am doing. You know, and when nothing happens, then people, they create some adventures to themselves, and you know, and imagine that they're so great. So that's why, because this Lila which we are playing is very absorbing, the Lila of Krishna in comparison is quite pale. Because he's the main hero there, it's his Lila, and I have my Lila here. And my Lila is, well, it may be not such a successful Lila as Krishna's one, but still quite, quite interesting. So, this, and when people are bored with their really petty and stupid Lila, they open some mundane literature and they read about some mundane heroes and heroines, and they completely identify with the heroes of these novels. And that's why, you know, and they actually, we're not living one life, even within this one life, we're living many, many lives according to the number of books which we read, and according to the number of affairs which we had in these books, vicariously. But it actually doesn't matter, because anything which we experience in the mind, and it doesn't really matter whether we experience it in the quote-unquote real reality or in the virtuous reality. It's ultimately because everything is there in the mind. And because the scale of emotions which are there when we are playing the main role, we are very much absorbed into this sort of creation. And it's a little difficult for us to concentrate on Krishna's Lila. And therefore, Sukadev Goswami, he created this, Sukadev Goswami, Vyasadeva created this beautiful Srimad Bhagavatam, and Sukadev Goswami, of course, recited it with so much emotions invested into his recitation to help us, to facilitate us to completely turn our meditation 180 degrees. To help us to meditate on Krishna instead of meditating on ourselves. But even in this case, the most important thing for reading of Srimad Bhagavatam, for studying of Srimad Bhagavatam, to be successful, it's very important to learn how to identify ourselves with the heroes of Srimad Bhagavatam. This subtle identification with the different heroes or different personages from Srimad Bhagavatam is very important. And therefore in Srimad Bhagavatam there is one Krishna, and there are so many devotees with whom we can identify. And this subtle process of identification gradually helps us to purify our consciousness, to purify our chitta, to purify our heart, to the extent that the reflection of Krishna's Lila will take place within our heart. Now our heart is very dirty, and therefore it can only reflect something which is very gross. You know, like people who are not very subtle, and you know, nowadays we are living in Kali Yuga, and in Kali Yuga people progressively and very rapidly become grosser, and grosser, and therefore they're going to groceries. They become more and more gross. They more and more identify themselves as a very gross, you know, kind of emotions, and therefore even the taste of people over the years, over the known to us history, is becoming grosser and grosser and grosser. Nowadays, you know, to get some emotions, you need heavy metal music, you know, which would penetrate your heavy layer of ignorance. You know, something Mozart will not do. No chance for him to penetrate through this thick layer of avidya. You know, you need something. Some sort of emotional response can be expected. Otherwise, you know, you're bored. So that's what we have, and therefore it's not so easy. What I mean to say is that to learn, to study Srimad Bhagavatam, and to read Srimad Bhagavatam in such a way that this identification process will take place is difficult for us, because it's difficult for us to relate to these sentiments due to our engrossment into the matter. The sentiments, the bhavas, the emotions which are described in Srimad Bhagavatam are too subtle for us to resonate with our heart. They are not really invoking any emotional response. We cannot relate to them. They are too, you know, too foreign. You know, especially, you know, when we read Chaitanya Charitamrita, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he came to show us how to practice devotional service in a real way. And, you know, of course, his practice of devotional service is just to cry day and night. And we read it and we can't figure out why is he so crying so much. What's the reason? There's not substantial reason, you know. Why doesn't he be happy? You know, there's after all prasadam is there. You know, what else does he need? So therefore, for us to learn how to meditate, it's a process, and it's not an easy process. It's a gradual process, and therefore Srila Rupa Goswami in Upadeshamrita says, Tannama Rupa Charitadi Sukirtananu Sprityo Kramena Rasanamana Sinyoja Tistan Vrajeta Danuragi Jananugami Kalamnayeta Kilam Ityupadesha Saram. That's the essence of all advice, and at the end, when we realize this most important advice of the whole Vedic literature, we will be able to reflect the feelings of the eternal associates of the Lord. Tadanuragi Jananugami. We will be able to really follow their footsteps. But that's not an easy achievement. It's not, we shouldn't take it cheaply. You know, Tishtan Vraje, you know, that we always live in this celestial Vraj, which is full of love and follow one of the associates. So what is most important is that, and therefore Srila Rupa Goswami says here, Kramena. Kramena means step by step. Ultimately, we should come to the stage of being able to meditate on Krishna Lila kalamnayat all the time, 24 hours a day. But before we come to this stage, there are some intermediary stages which we have to pass, and we have to know all these stages and how to pass them, and we have to know the dynamic of the path. So, therefore, Srila Jiva Goswami explains in his Bhakti Sandarbha the stages of meditation. Ultimately, yes, Satyam Param Dhimahi, let us meditate on the Absolute Truth. But what does it mean to meditate on the Absolute Truth? And Srila Jiva Goswami, he divides this meditation into 5 stages. And the first stage of meditation is accessible to us. That's what we do all the time. And the first stage of meditation is called Smaranam. But Smaranam, we have to really understand what Smaranam means. We often translate Smaranam as remembering, but there is a very specific process which is called Smaranam. Srila Jiva Goswami says, Smaranam means Kinchit Anusandanam. It means that we retrieve from our memory, from our chitta, some object which is stored there as a samskara, some memory of our past experience. It's very important that we can only do smaranam of something which we experienced. We cannot really do smaranam about Krishna because we didn't experience Krishna yet. We can only remember something which has taken place with us, which took place with us, which happened with us, and which is stored within our memory. So the process of smaranam, Srila Jiva Goswami very beautifully, very succinctly, but at the same time very beautifully explains. Kinchit anusandanam means that some memory of the past event or of past experience, something which you ate, smelled, or some person whom you met in the past, his image surfaces within your conscious mind. All the memories are stored within your subconsciousness. But then you can retrieve it, the memories of it, with the help of buddhi, by some conscious endeavors, or it automatically comes to your mind. Some experience which you had. And Kinchit Anusandanam means for some little time you investigate this particular image which is there in the mind. And then, your mind is very restless. I mean, it's not your mind, my mind is very restless. Your mind is, of course, very, very cool and meditative. But anyway, so the mind is quite restless, and therefore Kinchit Anusandanam. Kinchit Anusandanam means that you just, look at this subject which is there for some time, for a short while, and then you change it and some other picture comes into your mind. It's exactly like browsing on the internet. You get something, you read it a little bit, okay, later I will read it, and let's read something else, and then for Kinchit Anusandanam. Anusandanam means searching or investigating. Investigating, but investigating little bit, without any concentration, by quickly changing the subject on the subject. You just doing it. Of course, sometimes you may remember something for a longer period of time, but that only happens, please, it's very important, it only happens when this memory is associated with very strong emotion. If the emotional energy is stored with this remembrance, then you can dwell on this with your mind for a longer time, especially if it's negative emotion. If an image of your enemy surfaces in your mind, you can meditate on him or her for a long time. And it will be a very elaborate meditation. You almost will go into samadhi by thinking about him. But so this emotion, the connection between the memory and emotion is very important for successful meditation, and therefore kirtan is so nice, because kirtan is coupling the name with the emotions. We're not just saying Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, we're saying Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna. Yeah, something like this. we are investing emotions into this, and therefore it's easier to concentrate. So this is the first stage of meditation, which is called remembrance, which is called smaranam, and which we know, which we experience. The next stage of meditation is called dharana. And dharana, Srila Jiva Goswami gives the definition of dharana. Sarvataha chitam akrishya samanya akarena manodharanam dharana. The ability of keeping the mind, manodharana, when you keep your mind, or when you stabilize your mind by distracting it from some other objects on one particular object. You want to meditate on something, you consciously reject all other objects, and for some time you maintain this object within your memory. But samanya karena, this is the most important feature of this stage of meditation. Samanya karena means you can only remember about it in a very general way. In smaranam, the image flashes into your mind without any details for a short while. On the stage of dharana, you are capable of retaining the object of your meditation for some time, but still your memory of this object is very vague. It's not distinct. It's general. Therefore it's called samanya karena. The akar, the form of your meditation is samanya. It's schematic. It's not really detailed and full-fledged image within your mind. And then the next stage is called dhyana, visheshataha rupadi vichintanam dhyanam. It's the same as dharana. It takes place for a longer time. Precisely, it's 12 times longer than dharana. Dharana, if you are capable of keeping your mind within 11 or 12 seconds. If you're capable of, if you're Mahayogi, and if you're capable of meditating on just one subject matter for 2 minutes and 40 seconds, you are almost in the spiritual world. But that's not the main difference. The main difference is not the length of the time. It's not the the time. The main difference is visheshataha rupadi vichintanam. You're capable of seeing the object of your meditation visheshataha in a very specific way, in all the details. Like, we come to the deities and we're supposed to meditate for a short while. We meditate and then we turn away from them, and we're meditating on something else, and we don't really remember all the details. But when the very detailed picture with not only rupa, guna, and nama, guna, you know, much more vivid image comes into your mind, and you still investigate this image. You still consider this image, and you still are concentrated on this image. This is called dhyana or meditation. This is the real meditation. So the real meditation is this ability to penetrate into the object of meditation in a deeper way. When you really understand the beauty of this object of meditation, and of course we are talking about Krishna and his Lila. And then this is the third stage. The fourth stage is called Dhruvanusmriti. And Dhruvanusmriti basically means that the image which you have all of a sudden starts moving. You see the movie within your mind. Because first you saw all the details. You know, like Nam Sankirtan told me the story how he came to this artist who was doing this picture on Vastraharana Lila. And this artist with great enthusiasm started explaining that in Ananda Vrindavan Champu this detail is there, and in Gopal Champu this detail is there, and here it is in my painting. You know, if he would just, you know, draw some little sketch, that's dharana. But dhyana means that in all the details, in all the minute details, you see this picture which is described by our acharyas within your mind, which you got from some elevated devotee who is describing this Lila. And but then on this stage of Dhruvanusmriti, you can see that it's moving. It's not the static picture anymore. Because Dhruvanusmriti means, Anusmriti means the smaranam, which is, Dhruva means very stable and very thick, like the flow of oil. When we are taking oil, and the oil is moving in a very gracious and a very stable way. If we try to pour out water, then the water will be splashing all the time, but the oil will go slowly. So the same thing, you know, all of a sudden you see that this picture, your meditation is becoming alive, and something is happening there. So it's basically what again Srila Jiva Goswami explains. There are two forms of meditation. One is mantramaya upasana, when you see the static picture. When you meditate on a picture and you try to see all the details of this picture. But then when this picture becomes vivid and becomes alive, then it becomes swarasika, maya upasana. That's a very elevated stage of meditation. And actually this is, according to Upanishads, that's the stage when we get salvation. Because only on this stage our remembrance of the material world is completely slackened. Before that we still have some very strong pulling forces which are pulling us back. You know, we meditate on Krishna, and yes, yeah, for some time, and then, you know, some other meditation is pulling us back. Because there is a lot of memories within our mind, and they're all emotionally charged, and therefore this struggle is going on. We're trying to concentrate on the holy name, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. But for how long? You know, for how long? This, of course, this is totally uninterrupted meditation. You know, at least for a split second, it's uninterrupted, but then it becomes interrupted. You know, it's we know it's difficult because of these pulling forces, and you know, ultimately the next stage is called samadhi, And samadhi means the natural, spontaneous appearance of the object of your meditation within your mind without any of your conscious endeavors. Before that, you needed to concentrate your mind, to kind of invoke the object of your meditation from the memory to meditate. But on the stage of samadhi, there is no problem. It's just going on all the time. You're doing something automatically. You're living this life. You're doing something. You're maybe distributing books, but in the mind, you're tishtam vraje, tadanuragi jananugami. You are anuragi jana. You are anugami. You are the follower of the anuragi jana, of the devotee who has some attachment to Krishna. So, why do I speak about this? Because what I want to say is that first of all, sometimes people prematurely trying to engage in smaranam without understanding what smaranam is. They are trying to meditate on Krishna even though they don't have any experience on meditation, and therefore they are not meditating on Krishna. They are meditating on a cartoon about Krishna. That's why Srila Prabhupada was very much against cartoons on the topic of Krishna. They are not really, they don't really know what is Krishna. They only know some, caricature of Krishna or some sketch of Krishna. So that's not the way. The way is to chant the holy name, and within the holy name everything contains there. If the holy name has become the real object of our meditation, then after the name Rupa comes, after Rupa Guna comes, after Guna Parikar comes, after Parikar Lila comes. So there is a crown, there is a sequence which is very important, which should not be broken, which should not be violated if we want to really achieve something in this meditation process. And it's very interesting also that Srila Rupa Goswami, who explains and basically not explains, he invites us into this process, very insistently invites us into this process, but he warns us. He says that, he says a very important and very sad thing. He said that you cannot achieve prema within lifetime. Why? We should understand. Of course, sometimes people say, no, Prabhupada said we can, and therefore we could. It's not a problem, if you could, no problem. But Srila Rupa Goswami says, normally it doesn't happen. So, of course, we are abnormal, therefore we are eligible to achieve some abnormal results as well. But we have to understand the scientific reason why. It's very important because, again, it's about the transformation of our heart. And the transformation of our heart means the accumulation of certain samskaras, certain impressions within our heart. And spiritual impressions. And not only accumulating spiritual impressions, but making these samskaras, these spiritual impressions, very strong. Because achieving prema means achieving such a stage when, and Srila Rupa Goswami specifically says that your spiritual samskaras from previous life, when they're coupling with the spiritual experience of this life, when the spiritual experience of this life is coupled or is conjunct with the spiritual experience of the previous life, then only the experience becomes so strong and overwhelming, then it reaches the stage of prema. That it becomes rasa, it becomes very pleasurable. Within one lifetime you can achieve bhava. Bhava you are eligible to achieve. If you practice sadhana bhakti, you can achieve bhava, but then bhava will be stored within your mind, within your subconsciousness, and then in the next life when you again achieve some emotional experiences, then together they will create a very strong response. Like, you know, it's to give a mundane example of this. When we experience something for the first time, it may be a very strong experience, still it's not so overwhelming. But when similar experience comes next time, specifically I mean the relationship between young boys and young girls. When we experience something for the first time, it leaves deep impression. But it's not so deep. But when similar experience comes, and when it's overlaid with the previous experience, then it becomes totally overwhelming. That's why oftentimes people, they get their first love in high school, and then 30 years later, after 5 marriages, they somehow or other remember about their first love. Oh yeah, that was the best one. There was nothing special about it. It's just a play of the mind. This is how it works, and that's exactly what Srila Rupa Goswami also explains in the dynamic of spiritual experience. To experience rasa, you have to have already some past experience, some purva experience, and prakatam, and then Srila Rupa Goswami says, prakatan adhuniki cha asti yasya sad bhakti vasana. If sad bhakti vasana, the impressions, vasanas, deep impressions of sad bhakti, of real bhakti, if adhuniki and prakatani, if the modern, of the present lifetime experience, coupled with prakatani, with the previous experience, purva experience, then bhakti rasa svadaha, bhakti becomes very pleasurable. Bhakti becomes overwhelmingly strong emotional experience. So, and therefore, this is the next part of my description. Therefore, Shukadeva Goswami actually explains that first we have to go through this 9 cantos of Srimad Bhagavatam. 9 cantos of Srimad Bhagavatam are necessary for preliminary purification of the heart. If we study 9 cantos of Srimad Bhagavatam, we will resolve so many problems and so many contradictions which are there within our heart. The past experiences which we had created some anarthas within our heart, and the first 9 cantos are about this, how to untie all these knots which are there within our consciousness. And each knot in our subconsciousness has some energy, emotional energy within it. So actually even studying these 9 cantos is a very important emotional experience, but it's a preparation for the 9th canto. And in the 9th, for the 10th canto. And in the 10th canto, we already are capable of reflecting the emotions of the eternal associates of the Lord. Not before that. The heart has to be sufficiently clean from anarthas before we will be able to feel these subtle feelings of the highly elevated pure devotees. Their emotional experience are not really so accessible to us. For that, there should be the cleansing of the heart, which takes place while we're chanting the holy name, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. So we reach the stage of Nishta, and then some sort of form and qualities of the Lord are reflected in it. And actually Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains Tannama Uttama Shlokasya Gunan Aishwarya Madhurya Saundarya Adin Api Upalabdhayati. The name, the experience of the name, the real experience of real name, or at least Namabhas, at least the dim reflection of the name, can give the experience of qualities of the Lord, gunas of the Lord, together with Aishwarya, Madhurya and Saundarya, with his grandeur, with his opulence, with his sweetness and with his beauty. So this is what is within the name. Before trying to jump into the higher stages of meditation, please, and that's the message of all our acharyas, try to concentrate on the holy name again and again and again. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Hare Hare. So at one point this holy name will appear as a form of Krishna, together with Aishwarya, Madhurya and Saundarya, his opulence, his sweetness and his beauty. That's on the stage of Ruchi. On the stage of Nishta, you get some initial reflection of the form of the Lord with some of his qualities. On the stage of Ruchi, you get his elevated qualities of Madhurya and Saundarya. On the stage of Nishta, you may get opulent, majestic qualities of the Lord, which are more visible and more accessible. We can understand that God is all-pervading. We can feel He is present within my heart. We can feel that He is there. You know, His presence will be much more tangible than it is now. We can even interact with Him, but on a certain level. Then on the stage of Ruchi, Madhurya and Saundarya will be revealed to us. And then Mantra Maya Upasana and Swarasiki Maya Upasana will come. So actually, now I come to the real point. Why do we read 10th canto? Are we eligible to read 10th canto? And what is the use for us to read 10th canto? The point what I'm trying to make here is that if we go through 9 cantos, if our heart is sufficiently clean, then while reading the 10th canto, our heart will be able to reflect the emotions of the eternal parikars. And while reading this, for example, this chapter, we will really feel the trembling of our heart by experiencing the same emotions which the young gopis of Vrindavan are experiencing. You know, we will really experience the shyness and eagerness and all kinds of different mixtures of emotions. But you know, now we are more suitable to experience some rock music, and therefore this music is a little far away from us. So why do we read it? What is there for us? For on a certain level of spiritual development, it's clear what it is. On an elevated level of spiritual experience, reading of the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam is the nourishment of our initially sprouting emotions. Like even now, sometimes we feel some emotions, you know, some tears may, you know, glide little bit by little, you know, on our cheeks, and we want to take this little tear and keep it as a proof of my elevated status in devotional service. And you know, unfortunately, it evaporates very quickly. Otherwise, we would. So, so you know, if you experience little sprouts of emotion, they can be nourished by the descriptions of the pastimes of the 10th canto. But on our level, still, it's very much recommendable to read the 10th canto. Even though we may not be able to nourish our emotions because there is nothing to nourish yet, but nevertheless, we will understand a certain dynamic of spiritual development. And that's exactly what Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur explains when he says that pastimes of Krishna depicted in the 10th canto, especially his childhood pastimes, is the symbolic description of anarthas, and just by reading these pastimes, our heart will be cleansed. Why? Because in each of his pastime, there is a certain lessons, and certain important lessons, and certain important dynamic is there, and by reading them, even subconsciously, even without noticing it, we will be able to purify our hearts of anarthas. So, therefore, the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, sometimes people are afraid to touch 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. They say, no, I'm not eligible to do it. I know one devotee, he said, he gave a vow, I will not read the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, because I still didn't understand the previous 9 cantos. We will never understand 9 cantos. We still have to read the 10th canto and try to not to really analyze it in a very systematic way, but to be absorbed in it, and to actually rely or trust Shukadev Goswami and Vyasadev that a very important process of digestion of our subtle body is taking place. This is what Kapila Dev is explaining in the 3rd canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, that while performing devotional service, chanting of the holy name, reading Srimad Bhagavatam, doing kirtan and distributing books, worshipping the deities, and associating with the sadhus, the unseen and unnoticeable process of digesting of our subtle body is taking place. It's like when we eat the food, we don't really understand how it's happening. It's not that we consciously sit and say, okay, now let's inject a little bit of this, juice into the stomach because some proteins need some chloric acid. No, it's not work like this. It's just automatic. We're just sitting there, and the digestion is taking place. The main thing which we shouldn't do, we should not disturb the digestion. If we disturb the digestion, there will be indigestion, and indigestion becomes the food poisoning, and food poisoning brings about many bad consequences. So the disturbing the digestion, the element which disturbs the digestion is called, how? Yes. It's called offense. It's called aparat. This is what completely disturbs the nice process which is taking place, and therefore it takes so long and it's so bad. So initially we should just be be aware of this, try to avoid it by all means. Try to understand what it means to be offensive. Try not to manifest our offensive nature, which is there deeply within our chitta, within our hankara, within our false ego. And, try to serve, try to become humble and tolerant, and gradually this process will take place, and ultimately we will find ourselves on the bank of Yamuna River, taking off our sari and entering into the cold water of Yamuna in this month of Margashira. So that was a little introduction. The lecture didn't start yet, but it was necessary for us to kind of to orient ourselves into the subject matter and to understand that it's still very important. So I'll start a little bit of this Lila. I will not go too long. I will explain this first verse of 22nd chapter, and then let's see what happened next. We have still 2 more lectures. So Shukadeva Goswami explains, Hemante Prathame Masi Nanda Vraja Kumarika. So first of all, 22nd chapter follows the 21st chapter, as should have been expected. So, and in 20th chapter, the description of rainy season is there. And very poetically, Shukadeva Goswami explains what is happening in Vraj in rainy season, how the rain revives everyone, and he gives so many different beautiful metaphors of the rainy season, and he basically explains in this 20th chapter how sadhaka is flourishing or being revived coming in contact with Krishna consciousness, because wandering in this material world, in this desert of material world, we are dried up, and we experience so much negative emotions are there. Like we were walking down the street and there was this clinic of psychosomatic diseases for children. Now children have psychosomatic diseases. They hardly have any psychic, but they already have psychosomatic diseases, because there's so much pain is stored within our consciousness, so much negative emotions are there. So that's the experience of this desert of material world. And when we come in contact with Krishna consciousness, it's like rain. The rain which is pouring down on the dried up heart of a living entity, and it's revived. So Shukadeva Goswami explains this, and basically what he means, it's very important, because 20th, 21st and 22nd chapters are actually description of Purvarag. It's a first tiny little sprout of spiritual emotions. Everything before that, all the previous 19th chapter of the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, they are important, but they are to prepare us to this little, very gentle and very vulnerable sprouts of spiritual emotions. And that's why the rainy season is there, because we know in the rainy season all the seeds which are sown, they start sprouting and manifesting in the earth, and they're very, very gentle and very, vulnerable. So, and so in 20th chapter, it's the very beginning of this Purvaraga, symbolic description of this feeling of separation with Krishna, which is coming naturally into the pure heart. when the heart is pure, then we start longing of God. You know, where are you? Why did you desert me? Why did you turn away from me? You know, of course, I have forgotten you. Anyway, this sort of dialogue is coming on, but it's only possible when the heart is sufficiently pure. This longing, this sadness, this experience of meeting, of separation before meeting with the Lord, is accessible to us, but on a certain level of spiritual development. It comes to us, and basically it's the 20th chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam, and the 31st chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam, 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, the Purvaraga, these feelings are described in the song of gopis who hear the song of the flute of Krishna. They don't see Krishna. They only hear from far away the faint sound of Krishna's song. And actually, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, he said that the song of Krishna's flute, in our case, is Bhagavad Gita. Because Bhagavad Gita is Krishna's song, right? It's his song. And he is calling us. So this first experience, this first faint experience of spiritual emotions is possible when we are still far away, but we still kind of hear the voice of Krishna who is calling us. Come to me, come to me, come back to me. You don't have to be in this desert of the material world. So that's the 21st chapter, when the description of the feelings of Purvaraga, of married little grown-up girls of Vrindavan is described. There are two kinds of gopis in Vraj. The first kind is they're a little older and they're already married. Because according to Vedic culture, the girl should be married or at least engaged before the beginning of puberty. Otherwise, the mental or emotional attraction will serve a very bad service to the girl. Before that, she should know that there is an object of my meditation and my attachment, and there are two kinds of girls. One are already a little elder and they're already married. Of course, we know it's an illusory marriage. The story Srila Jiva Goswami explains very beautifully that all the girls in Vrindavan, when they grew up, they meditated on Krishna and they wanted to have Krishna of their husband, and all the parents of these girls, they were completely agreeable to their choice. They also wanted to have Krishna as their son-in-law, and it almost happened, but then Vasudev thought, what will happen to Krishna? Vasudev in Mathura, he heard that, massive marriage is about to take place in Vrindavan. My little son who is there will be married to, thousands of young girls. He heard this news and he became completely afraid. He was so, because he knew that if Krishna is married to all these girls, that's it, he's stuck there. He is stuck to the rest of his life, and he will be sorting out his family affairs. There is no way for Krishna to come back to Mathura. So Vasudev, he calls Gargachari, his family priest, And he says, you immediately, without any delay, go to Vrindavan and somehow or other destroy this plan. Somehow or other, make some, do whatever you like, you know better, you're Brahmana. I'm just a Kshatriya, but you're clever Brahmana. Somehow or other, tell them that if they marry Krishna now, then it will be very bad for their future, and there will be separation, and you know better, you're an astrologer. You tell them that the Rahu is there in the 8th house, and Shani is in the 7th, and so, and they don't understand anything, so, but it will sound very authoritative. Anyway, that's exactly what Gargacharya did. He came to Vraj and he started, and he entered into the plot with Yogamaya, with Purnamasi, and they were going around and they say, it's a good plan, but not now. You shouldn't do it now, because otherwise there will be very bad consequences. And therefore, ultimately, there were some, according to, it's not the time to explain all the intricacies of how Yogamaya works, but anyway, some sort of illusory marriages were arranged within the Vraj, and some girls were either engaged or married with some other boys. But there were girls who were younger, who were born later in the pastimes of Krishna. And that's the 22nd chapter of the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam actually describes them, their Purvaraga. And it's even more important for us to understand their feelings, because their feelings are less mature than the feelings described in the previous chapter. They're really beginning, and they're not mature enough themselves, because they are still very small girls. Still, they already love Krishna. Like, we have some little feelings towards Krishna. We don't have completely mature emotional apparatus to love Krishna. No chance. We are not emotionally mature enough to be engaged in Krishna. But, it's not a bad idea to have such a boyfriend. Especially if some transgender operation is possible, then... Anyway, so the idea here is that it's the very beginning sprout of emotions towards Krishna, romantic feelings towards Krishna, which is described here. And therefore, the few words are important here. I will explain it and finish soon. Hemante prathame masi. So he explains these lilas, which are according to emotional maturation, but he also compares this emotional growth with the passage of time. This is how, this is his, his trick. How Shukadev Goswami or Vyasadeva explaining this. He explains this, according to the passage of time, but his real intention is to explain how the emotional maturation take place within our heart. And therefore, we see in the 20th chapter there is rainy season. In the 21st chapter there is Sharat season, the early autumn, and in the 22nd chapter he says Hemante Pradhamemasi, in the first months of winter. So this lila took place in the first months of winter, which is Margashira, which is immediately follows Kartik Mass. After Kartik Mass, this Margashira Mass comes, and Krishna, strangely enough, in Bhagavad Gita says, among all the months of the year, I'm the month of Margashira. Why? You know, he says, oh, this spring is so nice because it's so many flowers are there, and there are so many other, and you know, Kartik is there. Why does Krishna say that the Margashira month is Vibhuti, is his special opulence among all the other months of the year? Why this is a very special time? And Srinath Chakravarti, he gives an explanation, and Srila Jiva Goswami agrees with this explanation. He says, Krishna says that out of all months, I am this Margashira month because Vastraharana Lila took place in this month. Because it left such a strong samskara, such a strong emotional memory within Krishna's heart that he said, yeah, it's a nice month. I like it. Because our liking of certain times of the year or whatever is according to the experiences which we had before. Certain periods of the year, they connected emotionally in our memories, and therefore they are very dear to us. So Krishna remembers about this on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. He is standing there in front of the opposing army and thinking about Vastraharana Lila. And says, out of all months of the year, I am this Margashira month. And therefore, he says, Hemante Prathame Masi. And of course, this is a very cold time of the year. And it's also important because the last word of this verse is vratam. Vratam means vow, and vow means austerity. The idea here is that to get Krishna, you need to perform some austerities. You know, and the ancient sages of India, of Bharata, they say that, you know, the rest of the world is the land of Bhoga. This is Bhogadesh, the land of enjoyment. And the Tapadesh is Bharata. Bharata is the land of Tapasya. And it's still, you know, Tapasya is still much more prominent in Bharata than anywhere else. You know, you go to Kumbh Mela and you see all kinds of people, weird people, doing all kinds of tapasyas. You know, somehow or other people in ancient Bharata, they had, and they still have, because they understand, if you want to achieve something, you have to perform austerities. Enjoyment leads you nowhere. Even if you want to help, even if you want whatever achievement you want to get, to enjoy in this material world, you need to perform austerities. And therefore he says, Hemante Prathame Masi, in the first months of winter, this Nandavraja Kumarika, the young unmarried girls of Nandavraja, of the village of Gokul, they performed vrata, they performed some severe austerities. And the next line is Nandavraja Kumarikaha. It's also a very interesting thing. First of all, of course, Kumarikaha means virgins which are not married yet. And Kumarikaha means that they're really small, because this suffix ka, not Kumari, Kumarika. Kumarika means, you know, like in Russian we have the same suffix, девочка. So this ka means they're very small girls, Kumarikaha. And Nandavraja Kumarikaha. Nandavraja Kumarikaha, it's interesting because in the Vedic culture, you cannot really marry with somebody from your village. You're not allowed, because you know, all the boys and girls in the village are considered to be brothers and sisters, and you're not allowed to marry with your too close relatives. It's a very strong prohibition, and still it's strictly followed in India. I live in this Anyor village, and I know some local people, and they tell me, you know, the marriage can only take place with a girl or a boy from a different village, not from the same village. So why then Shukadev Goswami says Nanda Vraja Kumarika? Why does he say that the heroines of this Lila are the girls, the little girls from Nanda Vraja, from the same village? So there are different explanations of this. One explanation is that Nanda Vraja is that somehow or other they are from different villages, not from the same Nanda Gaon of Nanda Vraj, but because Nanda Maharaj, he is the king of this whole area, and he knows girls in the different villages. So Nanda Vraja Kumarika means all these girls which Nanda Maharaj liked and wanted to have as his daughters-in-law. So it's some small girls from different villages which somehow or other Nanda Maharaj liked while traveling or going in this village. And another explanation is that actually Kumari here doesn't mean the girl from the same village, Nanda Vraja Kumarika, but Kumari means it comes from a Sanskrit play of words. Ku means ugly. The prefix ku comes from kustka, and kusta means ugly. So, and Mara means Cupid, god of love. So by saying Nanda Vraja Kumarika, Shukadev Goswami says that these girls were so beautiful that they made even Cupid ugly and even Cupid stupid. So this is, you know, they were so extremely beautiful that even the most charming creature in this material world, which is God of love, became completely ugly and stupid in front of them. So that's why this is another very rasic explanation of this Nanda Vraja Kumarika. So, and then Cheruhu, they were performed Havishyam Bunjanaha. That's another very interesting point. The point here is that Vrata means austerity, and austerity primarily means some restrictions in the food. So that's a very important understanding that, you know, austerity doesn't mean that you stand on one leg and then there is a fire in front of you and behind you, and then you go back to your room and you eat a huge amount of food. You know, and then of course to digest it you need some extra fire, so you go back to perform your austerities. No, austerities first and foremost means some restrictions on your food, because food is the most important, our most important connection with this material world. Most visible, most tangible connection, and we are very much dependent on food. So austerity means to lessen our dependence on the matter. That's the main point of austerity. I am now dependent on the matter, but I want to be less dependent. I want to rely on God. I want to be dependent on Him. And it basically means that I should try to restrict myself in the consumption of food. And very soon we will have Ekadashi, and Ekadashi is of course a very important example of this. It's the austerity. And any other religion you take, they will always explain that austerity means you restrict your food. And then what kind of restriction was there? Havishyam Bunjanaha. And of course, Srila Prabhupada explains in the purport here, they are quoting his Krishna book, why it is so important to perform austerities if we want to achieve something, especially why it is so important to restrict the food, because when we're restricting our food consumption, we purify the body. We're eating this food, and we're overeating, we're eating some strange combination of the food, this wide varieties of different foods we're eating, recently I was in one city, and they put in front of me 10 different varieties of cheese, and I was my first difficulty was to choose out of them which one. And there's so much variety of food, and because of this the body becomes contaminated. There is so much toxins accumulated in the body, and it's very difficult to meditate when our body is so bogged down, so much contaminated by all these toxins due to undigested food. And therefore it is said, what is Havishyan? Havishyan means, it's explained by Srila Prabhupada that this is certain kind of khichdi, but Jiva Goswami explains that Havishya, the very word Havishya, comes from the word Havan. Havan means sacrifice. So Havishya is a certain food which is so pure, which can be poured as an oblation into the fire of the sacrifice. So it definitely has to have some ghee as a part, as a component, because ghee is purifying. It has to have some milk also. Usually khichdi doesn't have milk, but Srila Jiva Goswami explains that this is some fresh grains, because this is the winter season when the grains are harvested already, and then the milk is there, and ghee is there, and mung dal is there. So it's a very light, and at the same time it's a very purifying food. Having all these cow components which are purifying by themselves. So ghee, milk, and fresh grains and dal cooked together. And also Ayurveda says that when different components are cooked together, then they're easily to digest. So and therefore, to take the same food every day would be very purifying. Therefore it is said, Chatur Havishyan Bunjanaha. They were enjoying, or they were consuming this Havishya to worship Katyayani Archana Vratam. To worship Katyayani. And who is Katyayani we will explain, because there's a lot of different explanations. Why did they worship Katyayani? And who is Katyayani? Basically, Katyayani, just some short introduction of the next subject, is the Yoga Maya. Not the material energy, not Parvati, the wife of Lord Shiva. It's Yoga Maya who is ruling in Vrindavan. And they were worshipping Katyayani to get Krishna as their husband. So they gave this vow, and I will explain what happened next and how it happened, what happened before that, because Srila Jiva Goswami gives a beautiful preliminary story which brings us to this point of the first day, Pratipat of Hemanta season of Margashira. So that was the beginning. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Yes. Do we have time for questions or so?
Who was asking?
Thank you very much, Maharaj, for a very beautiful and Thank you very much, Maharaj, for a very beautiful and unique explanation. I had two questions which are quite interrelated, and you spoke about also the emotional aspect of a sadhaka, and I was wondering how, especially in the process of japa, we are always, it's insisted that we hear very properly when we chant. And when you're speaking about creating samskaras, and when you're speaking about the 5 types of meditations by Jiva Goswami, Srila Jiva Goswami, then I'm thinking
5 stages.
5 stages, yes. And then how do we understand hearing in the whole process?
First of all, we are not only chanting in japa, we're also chanting in kirtan. And in kirtan, emotions are built in. Obviously, you know, and you're supposed to manifest emotions. It's just in the beginning stages, emotions are not advisable, because in the beginning stages, you should just concentrate on the mind, but at the same time, on the sound of the holy name, because the sound of the holy name is powerful. But at the same time, it's not that emotions are prohibited. Srila Prabhupada said, if some emotion comes, we should not artificially wind ourselves up or instigate our emotions. But if the emotion comes, it's very good, and Prabhupada approves it very much. He says it's a perfection of your chanting if you're hearing, but at the same time you're emotionally involved. If you don't feel emotions, don't try to artificially invoke these emotions in the beginning. They will come. They are coming. So they're not really hindrance. They are very advisable, but it's a matter of time and purification of the heart when they come. And of course in the kirtan they're there from the very beginning. And the second?
Thank you, Maharaj. And my second question was related to how, for example, when we read about japa, and then, for example, Sachinanda Maharaj and also Satsvarup Maharaj, they talk about this aspect of recognizing that the holy name is a person. And I was just thinking of how this is such an elevated understanding, because we see through meditation you get more purified and there is this blossoming of consciousness. So perhaps you could also address this, so seeing Krishna or the holy name as a person.
Well, the fact of the matter is that we should try to remember that the holy name is not different from Krishna, and that's what it means that holy name is a person. We have to remember that invoking the name of Krishna, we're invoking Him. We are not really chanting some mystical formula, without having some person on the background or behind it. We are inviting Krishna for a conversation, for a dialogue. So it's not that we should always remember, that holy name is a person, holy name is a person. No, holy name is Krishna. There's no difference, and while chanting him, while chanting his name, we are interacting with person, and therefore we have to be very careful. He's there. he's in the holy name, and he knows whether we really calling for him, or we are just, doing some other things. Sometimes we browse the internet, and at the same time, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, and Krishna says, okay, yeah. Yathamam prapajante tam statame bhajame aham. How you relate to me, how I will reciprocate with you accordingly. So you don't really care about me, so good luck. I don't care about you. So that's what we should remember, that the holy name is no different from Krishna.
Thank you for the picture. Just a question, two parts. Like, it is said that the holy name, like the sound vibration, includes everything, the guna, rupa, and the lila. But at the same time, I once heard that the sound actually, like the holy name, is still there in the guna and rupa and the lila. So, is reading more or less like just a catalyst, so that when we are chanting, we are raising our...
Yeah, as I said, Srimad Bhagavatam is the meditation guide. So Srimad Bhagavatam is the companion for our japa. Srimad Bhagavatam is something which we should remember while we're chanting japa. So these verses, if they come, spontaneously. So Srimad Bhagavatam is the Satyam Param Dhimahi, it's a meditation.
But are we focusing on getting these samskaras from reading or from chanting? Because there's no like sound while reading to some extent.
Yeah, but still you have samskara, you get samskara, you read, and some sort of memory is there, some sort of, and because it's not just, that's why Prabhupada included Sanskrit words into his books. It's the words which are pronounced by Shukadev Goswami, and Shukadev Goswami already invested so many things into there. So therefore we should read, and while reading them we are, coming in contact with the experience of Shukadev Goswami, with his samskaras. Not completely, but to a certain extent we are coming in contact with it. I guess it's too late. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
So, Bhakti Vijnana Maharaj ki
jai.